Hello, this is Amanda from Second String Spandex, and you're listening to the Southsider Studios podcasting system. For more great podcast programming, visit southsiderstudios.com or search Southsider Studios on iTunes.
Psst, hey, you got Stitcher? Well, we're on it, so get it! Southsider Studios now on Stitcher. Stitcher is an award-winning provider of news and talk radio for your mobile phone. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio.
Cinesmack contains spoilers of the spoiling type. If you don't want your spoilers spoiled, please turn back now. Otherwise, enjoy the show!
Hello, Cinesmacketeers, and welcome back to Cinesmack. I'm your host, Mike Keeler. Just wanted to say real quick, we apologize that you didn't get an episode last month. Things have been a little crazy. Once the weather starts getting really nice in Iowa, that's when all the productions kind of run out of the gate at once. So all four of us actually were busy with different projects and also kind of the same project at once. And before we knew it, Lockout was totally out of the theaters here, so we weren't able to see it. But a couple of our panelists actually did go see Lockout, so we are going to wait for it to come out on DVD, and we're going to do a special episode just for you guys to make up the one that we missed. But without further ado, I would like to introduce you to my co-hosts from Outpost 515 Productions, Mr. Sam Twomey.
Good evening, Cinesmackers.
From Cheshire Moon Films, Mr. Tom Haggis.
Oh, how I've missed you all.
And from One Genome Short, Gabriel Rowald.
It's good to be back.
Howdy, guys. How you been?
Good.
Good.
Actually,
Good.
I kind of feel disappointed in what I got done in the last, couple months compared to what these people did in these movies. But,
Well, some of us couldn't have done these movies without you, Tom, so you've done a lot too.
That's true. That's very true. As you may notice, we don't have a special guest this month. We were going to have a fellow filmmaker who actually makes really great documentary films, and he was unable to join us tonight due to a conflict in schedule. So the four of us are going to discuss these films. Of course, I don't get a vote, but these three will tell you how they feel. And let's go ahead and start it right off with The Monkey.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sherpas and adrenaline junkies, welcome to tonight's Cinesmack main event. Tonight, we have a French high-wire walker versus an English mountaineering dynamic duo. In the first corner, from 2008, directed by James Marsh, starring Philippe Petit, Jean-François Heckel, and Jean-Louis Blondeau, Man on Wire. In the second corner, from 2003, directed by Kevin McDonald, starring Simon Yates, Joe Simpson, and Brendan Mackey, Touching the Void.
Let's go ahead and we'll just start it with writing, and let's go ahead and shoot it over to Gabe.
Wow. Writing with documentary films seems interesting to me because, it makes you wonder, how much of it is actually quote unquote written and how much of it is just kind of retold, I guess. Also, the writers for both these films are credited for actually writing books. So both of these documentaries originally came out in book form, and naturally, I haven't read either of them, so I don't know. I can't play that game where we compare the book to the movie and that kind of thing. But I think writing is difficult. And when it comes to documentaries, I feel like anyway, a lot of the writing actually ends up being editing. You've got a known story, you've got known characters, you've got in most cases, in as it is with both of these films, you've got those characters telling those stories.
Right.
So I feel like there isn't a lot of writing that actually goes on in the creation of one of these movies. And that the real creativity, the real story construction, the real character building, the real drama and tension comes in the editing room. So it's difficult for me to say one way or the other, this one was better writing-wise than the other. Now, if we assume that a lot of the stuff that we see in the films actually comes from the written, counterparts, then I think I'd have to say that I feel like Touching the Void was a little bit more genuine and a little bit more personal in some ways because of the things that the author of the book, I believe it was Joe, right, that broke his leg. I feel like what he shared with us, the information that he shared with us, was more authentic and more open and more against his own personality as they portrayed him. And so I felt a little bit stronger connection to that. And so I think I would have to give it, if I'm going to give a writing credit to a documentary, I think I would have to give it to Touching the Void.
All right. Thank you, Gabe. Let's head on over to Sam.
Gabe, you make some really great points there about the writing, and in a documentary, a lot of times more the editing helping the final structure of the piece. Because I think it really depends on the filmmaker. But personally, if I were to approach a documentary, you would have probably a loose idea of what you wanted. But then once you have the footage, you'd be able to better weave the narrative. So unlike most of the films that we do here on CineSmack, it is a real difference for us to look at documentaries because the structure of making, lots of the elements that we usually weigh in on are a lot different. And I think we'll probably discuss that in several of these rounds tonight. I guess for the writing, then I'm going to go to the original material for the book. Again, both of these people that got credit for the writing of the original book. I don't know what it was about Man on Wire, but to me, there's such a difference in tone between the two films, even though they do have a lot of similarities. I really like the flow of Man on Wire, and kind of there's an opportunity for a lot more playfulness because the subject matter, while it is serious and there is elements of danger, etc., it kind of connected with the artist in me. And kind of portraying not only this daring feat, but also the artistic side of it. That it wasn't necessarily for personal adventure or personal satisfaction, which it was, but it was also, in a bigger scale, a work of art and something that he was doing to kind of, make. He was doing it more for other people as opposed to doing it for himself. I don't know really how that ties in with the writing, so it's just me babbling pretty much, trying to make sense of it. But if I had to choose between the two for the writing, I'm going to go with Man on Wire.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Are you also doing carpentry while you do the podcast?
No, I think I just tapped my fingers.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for bringing that to the attention of everyone. I will try to restrain myself.
All
He's
right.
gesticulating.
Tom.
Yeah, boy, you guys kind of took a lot of what I was going to say. I'm coming into this, and I'm trying the podcast new this time around. I don't know who I'm going to vote for each time, so I'm kind of listening and deciding as I go. One of the things I love about documentaries is, in a normal film, we're going to kind of rehash what you guys just said, but the writer kind of provides the skeleton, and then the actors and directors and set designers get to put the flesh on the bones, so to speak. But with a documentary, the editor is usually handed a lump of clay and a drawing saying, this is kind of the story we're looking at. And the editor gets to craft what the outer moldings of this is going to be like, the exoskeleton, so to speak. And it's a completely different process in building. And I love documentaries. I love making them. I love watching them because of that. And we have 2 films this time around that are really widely considered 2 of the best of their genre. And as somebody who has acrophobia, which is a fear of heights, and a little bit of claustrophobia thrown in, for good measure, these films freaked the shit out of me. I was so enthralled by what these people were able to do in this movie that to see something that I will never ever in a million years be able to do with a gun to my head. I would never be able to do what these guys were able to pull off. That being said, when it comes down to the writing, Man on Wire is so light and airy and whimsical and just laughing in the face of death. It's really, really, it's kind of a different beast, whereas Touching the Void is more about survival, and
right.
It's more of, it clings much more to that survival instinct. Watching the both of them and the way that they put the main characters' interviews in there with them, and it kind of goes back and forth. Going like 3 minutes into each of these, that these guys make it out alive. Right. The only thing you really don't know is if Man on Wire, does he actually get out there and was able to do it, and even that is pretty much spelled out right at the beginning of the film. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give it to Touching the Void, just because the story so hooked me and dragged me through this horrible ordeal with these people, that when he gets to the camp and he thinks for a fact there's always this possibility that the 2 guys have gone on without him, mm-hmm. that even though he made it back to the camp, he still might not make it. That awful desperation and feeling that from the beginning of the film all the way through, that just made me sick to my stomach the entire time, that I couldn't stop watching, and I couldn't turn away, and I wanted to. And so I'm going to give it to Touching the Void, just for the better story at the heart of it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. This is a really long piece of bet you didn't know, but I'll go ahead and read it. At the end, this is for Touching the Void. At the end of the movie, there's a written line claiming that Simon faced strong criticism from the climbing community after his return to England. This claim has been repeated in several press statements and reviews, but it's not correct. What really happened is that 1 month after his return in Europe, Simon went climbing in the Alps, unaware that the Daily Mail newspaper had published a wildly incorrect version of the Siulu story. I just totally butchered that, I'm sorry. Implying that Simon had tried to kill Joe. This was, of course, absurd, and the British climbing community dismissed it immediately as nonsense. However, back home, Simon discovered that a small group of senior members of the Mount Everest Foundation, the body that manages funding for climbing expeditions in the greater ranges, had misjudged the story and now wanted Simon excluded in the future from the MEF funds, a move that could basically kill Simon's climbing career. At this point, however, Joe Simpson had a correct version of the Siula story published in a respected climbing magazine, and the whole issue was cleared. However, in the DVD commentary, Joe Simpson himself clearly says that Simon came under much criticism after returning home, and that he wrote Touching the Void to defend Simon. Wow. That's pretty awesome. But let's go ahead and we will move on to acting, which this one's also kind of a weird weird choice for a documentary. So I go ahead and explain how you guys are kind of going for the acting in this. And looks like we will start with Sam.
You're absolutely right Mike, when you say it is kind of a strange point in the documentaries to talk about acting, because most of them, the bulk of the material usually is real life people telling their real stories, which is hard to make a judgment call. Of course, there is some acting to that, and I think that's very evident in Man on Wire, especially in how playful. I mean, the main character is so playful, not only in some of the recreations, which a lot of us before we came on the air were talking a little bit about, how to tell the difference between the points that were archival footage and what was acting in or reenacting at places. Mm-hmm. I think in Touching the Void, obviously, the majority of that is all reenactment, and it's superbly done. I mean, in both of these pieces, the reenactments are so convincing and they're so well cut in there that it's hard to tell as a general audience. And when you're enjoying the film, which both of these films were just engrossing. I mean, they really kind of brought you into the story right away, and It just kind of whisked you away to the very end. Just based on the acting of performances all taken together, I would have to say that for my personal watching pleasure, enjoyment, Man on Wire had a bigger connection with me. I think Touching the Void was spellbinding, but I didn't. It was a different experience for me. Whereas Man on Wire was a lot lighter, a little bit more whimsical. And also, seeing these characters after the fact, they pulled off this huge, what some had called the artistic crime of the century. I really enjoyed those characters. And in Touching the Void, it was, for me anyway, it was more like watching a special on the History Channel or something of that nature, where you have this narrative that's taking you through it, but I didn't identify as much with the characters themselves. So I think I'm going to go with Man on Wire for this particular category. Again, very tough category because our typical rules of acting and how we evaluate things aren't necessarily so with documentaries.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Sam. We did kind of discuss before the show, like, how are we going to lump acting into this? And I think you kind of hit it on the head there, Sam. Let's go over to Tom.
Man on Wire, the reenactments in it, and I understand that there's obviously this sense of whimsy that goes throughout it, and Philippe doing the silly things with the curtain and stuff, and actually kind of reenacting what it was like to be under the tarp and stuff when the guards walking through and everything else. But there seemed to be this, lack of seriousness that that goes along. I mean, the guy is on a tightrope walk between the World Trade Center, and that just I felt like some of the interviews and the reenactments, the fact that in the hindsight, I feel like it didn't really capture the seriousness of what they were going to do. A couple of the people in the interviews, as they started to drop out, as they realized what they were about to do in the moment, they're like, I can't be a part of this. If this guy dies, we have serious issues. And he just didn't seem to take it serious. And I find it hard to believe that in the moment when they were actually up there, that they weren't taking it as serious as they were looking back, because they got away with it and they did it and everything, everything else. But whereas Touching the Void, I mean, there's parts where Simon and Joe are breaking down on camera, and it was a lot easier for me to become emotionally engaged in Touching the Void. Whereas Man on Wire, there was a lot of gravitas and arrogance on Philippe's part, and which you need to be a tightrope walker. Don't get me wrong. I mean, those are some of the core characteristics of of that particular profession. But for me, I preferred the emotional investment that I put into Touching the Void, and a lot of that goes to A, the interviews, and B, the reenactments. And I don't, I had heard people, read articles where people thought that Brendan McKay actually probably should have been nominated for an Oscar for his role as Joe Simpson.
Really?
Yeah, there was a BBC article that said, 5 people that should have won the Oscar. And Brendan McKay's reenactments for Joe Simpson in Touching the Void was one of the 5 that they said.
Huh.
And I agree. I think it was an amazing performance that gets lost because it was in a documentary reenactment. But
Right.
it is an amazing acting performance that he delivers on this. And it completely sucked me in. And so I'm going to give my vote to Touching the Void.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Mr. Rowald.
Well, I thought it was interesting, Tom, that you said Touching the Void in kind of a French accent, and you kind of combined
You caught
the
that.
two.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I did. That
Yeah,
was interesting.
yeah. Wait till you see what I do in the next one.
I can't wait. This is going to be awesome.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, well, like we've all said so far, it's difficult to judge acting in a documentary film in most cases. But these two are slightly different, I think, as far as many documentaries are concerned, or at least from what we think of traditionally as documentaries, especially Touching the Void, because it seemed to me that such large portions of Touching the Void were actually reenacted. We didn't, we obviously didn't have any archival footage of them actually, climbing this mountain or coming down or, so vast portions of this story were reenacted. And, I felt like, well, it's kind of like making a fiction movie, except that we already have a story that we know how it goes. But I was really impressed with the amount of effort that went into doing these reenactments. And I, like Tom, I was very impressed with the acting for all of the actors doing the reenactments for Touching the Void. Now, that being said, Man on Wire, like we were talking about before, was a little bit confusing because it's like, well, how much of this is actually archival footage and how much of it is reenactments or recreations, as they put it? And I didn't realize how blurred the line was until we started talking about it briefly before the recording of the show. And I have to say that it, because it's not clear to me, it seems to me that those reenactments or recreations were pretty well done, not only from an acting standpoint, but also from a filmmaking standpoint, from a, making it look like a period piece. Now, there were some that were clearly recreations. They had bad wigs on and bad mustaches. They were like, okay, we're going to kind of make these guys look like they're in the 70s, but we're not going to try too hard because it's okay if people know it's a reenactment. But at other times, I'm like, did they have a camera there in these meetings? Did they have a camera there in the field when he's training? And I really felt like that line was very blurred, which to me means that those reenactments were pretty good, and therefore the acting was also probably pretty good. But I'm also going to base part of my vote on the real people, the real individuals who are interviewed, who live these events, and that we get to see from time to time in the interviews on the screen. And I think it actually comes down to my personal feelings about these individuals. In Touching the Void, they talk a little bit about how the one guy that they pick up to watch their base camp, he kind of doesn't like Joe.
Right.
And he likes Simon a lot better. And Joe's kind of, he's kind of arrogant. He's kind of, not all that friendly. And, what if something happened to them? Who would I want to come back? Well, yeah, definitely Simon. So there's this portion of Joe that you feel he's cocky, he's arrogant, he's kind of unpersonable, and he's just out for glory, to climb this mountain. But then you kind of feel the same thing about Philippe in Man on Wire. He actually comes across, as Tom said before, very, very arrogant, very full of himself. And this may go back to the writing and editing a little bit. I may have excluded the part at the end where he sleeps with kind of his new groupie. He meets a girl at the end of the, after he's accomplished this feat. And he's been in a long-term relationship with another girl that they show throughout the documentary. And he just goes and has his fling with some random girl. And I really felt like that was, that didn't really, show much for his character, in my opinion. And it's funny because I thought he was kind of well-spoken and kind of interesting and kind of whimsical, like we've said, until that point. And then I kind of said, I kind of don't like him. I feel like he's just been using all these people for his own selfish purposes to gain fame in having done this feat. And so at the end of that, I felt like I didn't really like that character, if you will.
Right.
So I think for me, because of those things, because of how well the reenactments were done, and my personal feelings about the actual people portrayed in the films,
right,
I think my vote goes to Touching the Void, because the reenactments and the acting are really well done. It's like watching a movie, just a regular Hollywood blockbuster movie. In the end, I felt like Joe's character was redeemed. He kind of came around. His character transformed. It had an arc like you might try to write for a fictional character. And so, therefore, I think my vote goes to Touching the Void.
All right. Thank you, Gabe.
Yep.
Some of the long-distance shots in Touching the Void of Simon and Joe climbing the mountain are played not by the lead actors, but by body doubles, who are actually Simon Yates and Joe Simpson themselves. That's kind of cool, I think. All right, let's move on to our third round, which is going to be directing. And we'll start off with Tom.
When we do bad movies on this show, we've done quite a few of them.
Yes, we have.
And we're faced with the decision where we feel awful that we have to give one of these horrible movies a vote. This is one of those really great shows where I feel really bad about having to declare a winner between these two films, because I would never want to turn anybody off from watching either of them. Obviously, with our show, we tell everybody, hey, we're doing Man on Wire versus Touching the Void. Go see them. And that's really kind of our main focus of the show, is to get people to watch these movies and talk critically about them.
Correct.
Go see Birdemic. You'll be better. I just earned my $10.
You know what? I have to say, it's a lot of fun. I've got to say that.
It is, and that's obviously another primary function is to have a lot of fun talking about films and movies. Right. And the directing is one of those where the director, I think, Kevin McDonald and James Marsh have such a hand in how these stories are pieced together, and you can see them looking over the shoulder of the editors as they're delicately putting these intricate stories together, with a hand towards emotion and driving the story forward. And they both do such a great job. I feel awful having to choose one over the other. However, boy, the crafting of the story in Touching the Void is really, really great. And while I have both of the same sense on both of Man on Wire and Touching the Void, watching them from a filmmaker standpoint of how did they do that, especially with the recreation footage. Especially Touching the Void was really one of those that I have no idea how they got some of those shots. The one where he's at the bottom of the chasm and looking up into that little tiny pinhole that he had fallen through, yards and 120 feet above his head. How did they get that shot? And it had the feeling of this big budget action movie, and at the same time, it's not. It's this this documentary that these guys put together. Man on Wire has the same thing. I'm trying to figure out how did they get these these shots, where the recreation stuff and the real footage and everything is so blended seamlessly, and right down to the color timing that they did to make the reenacted footage look archival, and everything else is done so well. I'm going to give my vote to Touching the Void, because I felt that the directing was more epic than in Man on Wire, but it's really, really, really close. I like, and I don't want to change my mind, but yes, Touching the Void. Sorry, Man on Wire. I'll make it up to you in the overall, but probably not.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Let's go on over to Gabe.
Yeah, I think I'm with Tom on that. Both of these are really masterfully executed from a directing standpoint, and I was really surprised when Touching the Void started at how cinematic it was, because I was expecting a documentary, and I wasn't expecting things like really beautiful close-ups of these characters with snow on their faces and frostbite and just these sweeping landscapes and aerial shots and things like Tom mentioned, the chasm scene where it's like, well, how did they do that? I mean, did they actually find a chasm and drop this actor down in there, or did they have a set? Or how did they do this? And it was just really well done and impressive. And then I was also kind of a little bit surprised about Man on Wire, because it had the same kinds of elements to it. It maybe wasn't quite as grand, but it was really very cinematic in many ways. And they did a really good job of making it seem like it was happening in that time. Now that's one thing that Touching the Void didn't necessarily do. They didn't try to make it look like archival footage. They didn't try to make it necessarily look like it was footage that came from that time. But Man on Wire definitely did. It was just really well done. I can't think of any better way to explain it. But I think in the end, I felt like Touching the Void was like watching a movie, and interspersed with interviews with the people who actually lived this movie in real life. And the cinematography was gorgeous. The editing was great. I think of things like Mike. You would enjoy these scenes near the end where Joe is trying to cross this kind of this glacier in this field of rocks, and he's getting kind of disoriented. And they're using, I can't remember the name of the rig. You could probably help me. It's the rig where it's connected to the actor himself.
Oh, Snorri Cam.
Yeah, the Snorri Cam. Yeah, and they're doing something like that with it, and it's a really disorienting effect, and you start to feel this with him, and it's really fun to watch and very well done. So I'm with Tom. It's hard to pick one over the other because they're both so well done. But if I have to, I think I'm going to have to go with Touching the Void.
All right. Thanks, Gabe. Mr. Twomey.
Great points, gentlemen. And I agree with you 100%. One thing, I really, really enjoyed Man on Wire, and the whole debate about what is archival footage, what is a recreation, and the way they blend together. In a way, that's kind of where my vote hinges on, because if some of this stuff was recreated and wasn't archival, there's all kinds of articles online about what's real and what's not, but nothing substantially says, what is real and what's not. But to have to recreate, a set, the Twin Towers, or portions of it anyway, and have it blend so seamlessly with the archival footage that they were able to get, and then all of the feelings that just that location has for most Americans that are watching it, even though, there's zero mention of 9/11 in that film. But how many times that my mind drifted back to 9/11 as you're seeing the construction of the World Trade Center and obviously archival footage that was kind of out of 16 and seeing those beams come together. Like there's some levels there that I think different audiences will put different feelings into. Certainly, anyone that was affected by 9/11 is going to have a different reaction to some of that material, even just seeing the World Trade Center put together. But I really do agree with our other panelists on touching the void. Not only do you have a great documentary, but just to put that thing together, you have all of the elements of a major fictional production, from makeup to their costuming to the sets and the way they shoot it. And watching it, it's not your typical documentary. Either is Man on Wire, but Touching the Void has this wonderful addition of having all these typical film elements, including very specific close-ups. There's a couple different times where you see these really beautiful lens flares that kind of wash over the actors and really, really heighten the experience of these people are in the elements. It's not just we're putting these actors on there and they're going to look like they're in peril. The way that it's cut together and the way it's overall put together with all of the elements of a major Hollywood film really helps you as the viewer kind of put yourself in their shoes. And because they don't just focus on the actors when these things are going on, they're focused on the elements. So they cut to these really wide shots so that you can see the vastness of the area that they're in. It's amazing. It's such a fresh take on the documentary, and I think that's why it really connected with audiences without even knowing why. The scope was just so much bigger. It was so much more than people retelling a story that had been made famous in print. And so as much as I enjoyed Man on a Wire, I'm going to have to give my vote for this one to Touching the Void.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Just real quick, I'm going to ask you guys towards the end of but I want you guys to think about it. Since all four of us are filmmakers, if there was going to be a documentary, you were given, let's say $10,000. Say, hey, go out, make whatever documentary you want to make. I want to know, once we wrap up here and get our totals and everything, what you guys would shoot. What story do you want to tell? Apparently, I would like to tell one about myself learning English. So just go ahead and keep that in your head as we go on to our last round, which is going to be overall, and we take it back to Gabe.
Okay. Well, and I think in this round, we get a chance to talk about some of the things that, we don't really get to touch on in the earlier rounds. And one thing I'd like to mention about Touching the Void is the makeup. Not only was this production fairly epic in scale, and, more like watching a blockbuster movie than watching a documentary, I think one of the things that gave it that was the acting. Mm-hmm. And then I noticed they were doing some extreme close-ups on these characters, and they had, they had been out in the elements. They had lost a bunch of weight. They had frostbite. They were dehydrated, and I was amazed at the makeup because I didn't notice the makeup.
Uh-oh. We lost Gabe.
We're experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Apparently, someone did not agree with Gabe and has taken him out.
If I had a Gabe impression, I would just continue on like Gabe, but I haven't got the Gabe impression just yet. So, sorry, folks. I'll work on it for next time in case this happens again.
Gabe kind of sounds like a stuffed-up Jimmy Stewart. You couldn't do that.
Oh, well, guys, I'd like to say that the makeup was just really amazing. I just kept thinking, gee, I'm watching a movie. And, okay, sorry. That's all I got.
All right, welcome back, Gabe.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know where you'll cut this, but I'll try to maybe blend it in a little. Maybe.
Oh, don't worry. We had a Gabe fill-in for a while.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, I really wouldn't say I'm a fill-in.
Wait, there's two Gabes. I don't know who's who.
well, let me tell you. I think the real guy's back.
Okay.
Oh, I love Jimmy Stewart. It's awesome.
Anyway, okay.
Go ahead, Gabe.
I really like Touching the Void because of the makeup. I thought the makeup effects were really excellently done.
This sounds like what I learned on my 3-minute vacation. You're just kind of reading it really fast. Sorry,
right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, the makeup was really well done. The frostbite looked very convincing, and there were even parts where they were so dehydrated their lips were all like cracking, and that they had been they had been exposed to the elements of sunburn and all this kind of stuff. And I just really thought that was very convincingly done. And so I was very, very impressed with that because you don't even see that stuff in big budget Hollywood films. And so I think, Man on Wire, overall, I enjoyed it quite a bit, but I don't remember those kinds of things standing out to me. I thought it was really well done. I thought the story was well told. I thought the interviews were good. One of the interesting things I found about Man on Wire was how each of the characters was a little bit kind of not happy with some of the other characters. They didn't necessarily like some of the other characters. The Americans in particular weren't liked very well. They were like, these guys are idiots. I think he showed up stoned. And the one guy's like, yeah, of course I showed up stoned. I smoked pot for every day for 35 years, and I don't know why I wouldn't have smoked it that day. They just didn't like the Americans, and they didn't portray the American characters in a very positive light. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And I also thought it was interesting how Philippe was so obsessed with this idea, and he convinced so many of his closest friends to help him pull it off. Mm-hmm. But in the end, the result was that he alienated himself from all his closest friends. It sounded to me like most of his closest friendships basically dissolved after that. He had accomplished what he wanted. He had gotten what he wanted out of those people. He had reached a certain level of fame, and he was done with them. Huh. Or they were done with him. They were like, we've given so much for you, and we're getting nothing back. And I really found that interesting, that dynamic, because it wasn't necessarily in your face. It was very kind of subterranean, little comments here and there that they made about Philippe and what his feelings were about it. He didn't seem to mind all that much that that these friendships dissolved, it seemed. But I found them both really compelling. You don't think, I'm going to go home and watch a documentary tonight. I really want to watch something entertaining. I'm going to go watch a documentary. Well, I might think that now, because both of these were really very entertaining. I enjoyed them both immensely.
Good. And
I would recommend them both to any of my friends. But if I'm going to pick one, I think Touching the Void was my favorite. So I think Touching the Void gets my overall vote for epic scale, for directing, for acting, for engaging me in these characters. It's just really well done.
All right, thanks, Gabe.
Yep.
Sam.
That was Gabe. I thought that was Sam doing Gabe. No.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
I know we sound. He can
Holy
do
cow.
a pretty good impersonation.
Sam, later I want you to do my voice, okay?
I can't.
You just plug your nose, man. It's not that tough.
Okay, I'll get it like a nose plug, like one of those swimmers' nose plugs.
Exactly. That's exactly where I get it from. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good points, Gabe. Glad you could come back and join us.
It's nice to be there.
So we're in the overall category now. So we get to talk about those little things that we may not have been able to touch with in other portions of this discussion. One thing that I really have to say, and it really kind of bugged me about Touching the Void, is the backgrounds that they had for the interviews. Like they had like this rumpled type curtain. I know it's such a small detail, but like it just was like, really? That's the background that you're going to choose to shoot these guys against? It was so distracting for me. I didn't like that choice at all. What I did really like in Man on Wire is that the interviews had a much different feel than a lot of documentaries that I've seen. And part of that went to the overall kind of playfulness of this, the Philippe character, but not just him. The way that we came into some of those interviews sometimes, sometimes we had like a dramatic zoom in, and sometimes we had just kind of like an awkward static shot before they even started talking that really kind of helped set up the character or the person that was about to start to tell their tale. And so that element of Man on Wire really intrigued me. I thought it was a unique way to kind of frame those interviews and make them stand out more than just your standard static shot, cut away to whatever they're talking about, and then cut back to them. I really appreciated that. Earlier, Gabe had said that he really kind of lost his interest in the Philippe character when he had his brief, fling with that, groupie right after it happened. But, I would say that it was pretty evident from the very beginning that that's the kind of character that Philippe was, that he was centered on his goal. And yes, other people were helping him, but his vision and his vision only were the most important things. And I think we got the biggest glimpse of that in the first voiceover from his girlfriend when she talked about how they first met, and then she realized all of a sudden that it was going to be all about him and following his dreams, and he never once asked her or thought about what she might want to do. But she was okay with that. And I think that kind of was the overall feeling of the collective that he associated himself with, is they saw this kind of, crazy individual that they don't know why they wanted to follow him so much. But they really kind of sacrificed a lot of their interests to just help him achieve his. And I think his interviews were quite revealing, even years after the fact, that, that is still his character. That it's, he's basically celebrating what he accomplished, not necessarily acknowledging how much help or the magnitude of the help that he had, or the position that he put some of these people in, or potentially could have put them in. One of his associates, was deported, barred from the United States forever, while Philippe got off really easily by, performing some basic community service. And then also, I think, after he did the event, the whole, hooking up with this kind of groupie, in a way it makes sense. I mean, you just accomplished something that you have been working towards your entire life, and something that's so big, so monumental, and then you get that first kind of taste of fame for it, for someone that realizes it, in that moment. I don't even care if he was married or what. I think a lot of people would have done the exact same thing, especially in the time, the early 1970s, and foreigner being in America. Like I really thought that didn't turn me off about his character. I think it was really revealing about who he is, and the fact that he wasn't necessarily the type of person that I would necessarily hang around with or would consider a good friend. I think the glimpses that we saw of his character from the reenactments and the retelling of all the stories all the way up until seeing him at the end, it was a real slice of life. We really got to see inside this larger-than-life character. Anyone that would attempt what he did, to walk across a wire on top of the World Trade Center, like it is mind blowing. I mean, climbing the mountain like and touching the void, that's very amazing too. Both things I would never do. I think Tom said that earlier, but just I could not imagine being on that wire with those winds and at that height in the World Trade Center and those views that he had. Something about Man on a Wire really kind of inspired me. Of course, not inspired me to wire walk or anything like that, but realization of what some artists will do for their art without even thinking about the perils of themselves. And Tom had mentioned in the first round, I think, how some of the characters, they didn't take it so seriously, and it was kind of laid back, and there was all this death elements, which they did talk about a little bit. But I think in a way, especially at that time, they were so in it, their heads were so in it for what they were doing, that the thoughts of their mortality were just glancing images, glancing thoughts in their head, and the excitement of what they were doing at that particular moment just took them over. And then the ones that had a little bit more sense about what they were trying to attempt are the ones that got out and felt very good that they didn't have to be there, they didn't have to be arrested or all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I just like the balance that they struck in Man on Wire, and it's amazing that the story happened 2 years before I was born, and as I was watching, it was really the first time I'd ever heard anything about it, and I was just amazed, inspired. And I think overall, my vote has to go to Man on Wire.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Tom, you're going to close us out.
I love a good survival film. I think I've said that before. One of the reasons I like Danny Boyle so much is that he's the king of the survival film. And Touching the Void is such a pure essence of the survival film. And this story of isolationism and loneliness and what someone does to survive. That being said, I think I've said that phrase 3 times today. The Man on Wire is there is so much audacity behind what they do, and it's so absurd and ridiculous. And the film does such a great job of capturing that. When I look at these 2 films, I've got 3 small kids. I can't wait to sit down and watch Man on Wire with them and show them that there was a time when a man. Well, first of all, it's a wonder. First of all, it's this wonderful poetic gesture that they put this film together to the World Trade Center, and it's a really cool way for it to, the World Trade Center to live on. But to show them these 2 towers, and that a man once walked on a wire between them. And what you're capable of if you put your mind to it and erase all doubt. Because quite honestly, him out there on the wire wasn't the breathtaking part of it. It was actually the putting the steps together and doing it. And that's how it is for any large task. It's the steps and all of the little arrows hanging on the edges of skyscrapers. Those are the things that are going to throw you off. Once you actually get out on the wire, that's the easy part. Because then you're in your element. And Man on Wire is such a great heist film, in the spirit of like Ocean's 11. Oh my God, I can't believe I said Ocean's 12 first. Oh God, George Clooney's here to kill me. like the great, Thomas Crown Affair and Ocean's 11. It is a heist film at its core. And I love Touching the Void, and it really hit me on kind of an emotional and personal fears that I have and everything else. But I'm going to have to give it to Man on Wire, because in spite of the criticisms that I've done it compared to Touching the Void, it's such a beautiful film, and it is people you've just thrown the word whimsical around a lot. But I'm going to give my vote to Man on Wire because I like the feeling that it left me with this. Feeling that if you just get up out of your damn seat and go out and do it, you'll succeed. But if you don't get up, you're not going to. And nothing is insurmountable as long as you put everything you got into it. So The romantic in me apparently has taken over, and I'm going to take Man on Wire for the win.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
All right. Well, while I attempt to do math, let's go ahead and we'll start with Sam. If you are given, like I said, $10,000 or however much you want, just make up a number. What would you go out and shoot for a documentary? Like, what would you want? This is your only chance to do a documentary. What would you do it on?
Well, I think I would do a documentary on the new face of being gay in America. And I think it would encompass everything from, people that are younger people and older people that are still in the closet to, what the current debate on gay marriage and where that may go in our country. And just the overall opinions and feelings of what it means to be gay in America in 2012 or beyond. I think, we've seen some types of those documentaries, but I think because of the developments within the last several years, even the last 5 years, I think it would be really interesting to show the wide range of what the homosexual world is here in America. I mean, there is quite a spectrum of homosexuals here. It's not just what most the media would normally show or what you see, say, at a Pride event of drag queens and twinks in tight underwear, and that has its place. But there's a lot of people that don't necessarily identify as gay, but they are gay, or they have sex with people of the same sex, and either they're too embarrassed to come out, or they believe if they don't actually give themselves that title, they can still be married. There would probably be a chapter on people that are married and that fool around, or people that get married for all numbers of reasons and then come to find themselves later in life. I've had a great friend who his dad got married in the 60s because he felt that was what he had to do, and had 4 kids, and then it took him till he was 60 years old to come out of the closet and really start to live his life the way he felt that it should be lived. And there's a lot of factors, good and bad, that you could explore in that. And also, I would focus on some of the hatred that's out there, some of the hatred that's cloaked in religion, things like the Phelps organization, or even people like Bob Vanderplants that we have here in Iowa that cling to religion to justify the hatred of other human beings. And I think it could be very, very revealing to show people, if they were willing to watch, or even try to attempt to see what is the face of the new gay America.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Let's go to Gabe.
Wow, I don't know if I can follow that up. That would actually be a meaningful and interesting documentary. And I was going to be kind of maybe predictable and maybe take a little bit of a marketing approach to it too. I was trying to think of what I would make a documentary about, and I'm not sure I know exactly. I think I'd have to find a story that I felt resonated with me. But the first thing that came to mind was I think I would do a documentary about the 48-Hour Film Project, especially here in Des Moines, because it seems a little bit self-reflexive. Maybe it seems a little bit predictable, but I do think it would be interesting. One of my favorite parts of participating in the 48-Hour Film Project is going to the screenings, seeing the results, and talking to the other filmmakers about the experiences that they had getting these films in. There's so many fun stories about making these films, and everybody does this on the same weekend, but everybody's story is so very different. We even have to battle things like the weather. I remember one year, I don't remember which year it was, but right near the end, a huge thunderstorm came through, and it knocked out power. there were all these people saying, "Oh yeah, I lost power to my computer. I had to move to another place to finish the editing." Yep. People are having to travel in this downpour. There are just all these great stories, So I just feel like it would be a lot of fun and very interesting to do a documentary about the 48-hour film project and the experiences that those young, talented filmmakers go through to finish this contest.
All right. Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah.
Tom.
Boy, I was going to do that too, Gabe. So,
well, let's do it. I think
the problem would be, of course, that we wouldn't be able to then participate.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm gonna give it up at some point. I'm getting too old for it. It takes too much energy.
I have one documentary idea that's kind of in my pocket that I'm researching right now, and I'm going to hold on to that one right now. But the other one I would like to do. And I think I've talked to a couple of you guys about this, but I'd love to do a story about the downfall of the Iowa Film Office. And
damn it, you took mine.
See
what you started, Gabe?
Yeah, sorry.
I would love talk to the people involved in it, and it kind of, I mean, it's silly because the only people who are going to watch this movie are other filmmakers, but just to kind of put out the story of exactly what went down. And a lot of filmmakers were, and rightly so, a lot of them, did some very illegal acts. And as a result of a couple of bad apples, the entire Iowa film community was punished, basically, because, we had this really great program and a couple people abused it, and it was taken away from all of us. But at the same time, I think that there were politicians that were culpable in it. It was a poorly designed program to begin with that had no checks and balances, and I'm biased, but I don't think that the media told the whole story. I think they're more interested in, hanging people out to dry and get ratings, that kind of thing. So, and I don't think the full story has ever been told about that. So that's what I would do. If anything, it would just be a cleansing to kind of help. This is what happened. This is what we learned from it, and this is how we can rebuild the Iowa Film Office to something greater than it was before, and be wiser for it, and not allow people who have absolutely no interest in the Iowa film community to begin with, call us all cheaters and thieves and everything else, when in fact we're just trying to tell our stories and bring a little bit more business to the state of Iowa. And I think it's I think a lot of good can come from that. And just casting a wide net over all of us doesn't do us any good. And I think it's a story that would need to be told. And have I stalled long enough, Mike? You got one?
Yeah, I've got one.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
And there it is.
Well, I kind of want to comment on each of yours. Sam, I totally agree. I think there too often someone's hatred of another person has always been covered up by their use of religion as a weapon. And as a person that I'm not as Christian as I should be a lot of the time, but I still try to practice it. Those people give me a bad name, especially when it comes to the love thy neighbor part. You shouldn't be condemning people to hell just because you don't agree with how they vote, how they raise their kids, or their sexual orientation. So, I think that would be a fascinating documentary. Gabe, I've been there with you. I've done quite a few 48-hour film projects, and when you brought up the whole makeup for Touching the Void and the chapped lips and everything, I was actually going to break in and say, oh, you mean like during the 48-hour film projects? Because it's always, in July. Oh,
God, yeah.
And Tom, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. They cast a wide net over all of us. And the funny thing is, everyone that is on this podcast and a lot of our guests, I think even if you combine all of us and all the films that we have done, none of the budgets for those films totaled overall would reach the minimum requirement to get those tax credits when they were here. I mean, you had to spend a lot of cash, and it never helped us out. It helped everyone out in Hollywood and on possibly the East Coast. It didn't help the Iowa filmmakers at all. And I think that would be a good way to look at it, and how it kind of brought it down. But we're back up on the rise again, and I feel that way 110%, if that's even possible. So I guess since wow, you guys, I'm going to take a selfish one, I guess. I love documentaries. I love watching them. I love learning about facts about people that I may have never known about. And I've always really wanted to get to know my family better. And I would love to do a documentary like a brief history of Mike Keeler. You know, I would love to go back and start with my brother, sister, mom, dad, and go clear back as far as I could go just to find out who I am. I think that's kind of a question everyone asks, you know, who am I and why am I here type of deal. And I would like to know who I am, just from my history, because if you don't learn from your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And would like to kind of think that might work out in my favor. But yeah, very interesting, guys. You ready for the announcement on who won this bout?
Yep.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes, go.
I'm on pins and needles up in here.
I think we oh, there's Sam.
No, I'm here.
All right, here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Your winner by decision is Touching the Void.
To be honest, I thought it was going to be a lot closer. Every time I think it's going to be closer, it never is. And any time I think it's going to be a blowout, it's always close. I can't call this. I'm horrible at this job. Why'd you guys hire me?
Well, I think this one, even more so than some of our other podcasts, and Tom said this earlier, you know, these are two great films, and I hope that if people haven't seen them, they will see them, because and hopefully it will give them more of a respect for documentary as a form of filmmaking. These are really incredible films.
Right. I think we should probably try to work in maybe one documentary a year, at least for us. I enjoy them.
You mean that we shoot or that we talk about?
No, that we talk about. I wouldn't mind doing a documentary either, but that's a whole different conversation. But I wouldn't mind us watching, you know, two kind of like-minded documentaries at least once a year. I think it would change things up.
Right.
So,
I just wanted to say briefly that I was talking to one of my friends over lunch about these two movies, and he was saying how he'll often actually choose to watch documentaries on Netflix, and he said I wouldn't normally have gone to watch documentary movies, but things like Netflix and other, you know, streaming services are creating more of a market for these types of things. And I think also, you know, with the rise of channels like the Discovery Channel and other, you know, channels like that, documentary filmmaking is becoming more popular and more mature in many ways, I think. So I think a lot of people would enjoy watching more documentaries, and it's easier for them to do now. Because in the past, when would you watch documentaries? I mean, would you go to the video store and rent a documentary? It's a bit of a risk.
Right.
If you know, because it's like, oh, do I really want to watch a documentary when I could watch this blockbuster, you know, summer movie, which may also be a risk, but
more often,
you know, now if you start, you know, if you're sitting at home and you're streaming a documentary and you end up not liking it, you can just stop it and stream something else. But I think in the end, what's happening is that documentaries are becoming more readily available, and people are realizing how informative and enjoyable they can be.
Yeah, I agree. I think that owes a lot to the History Channel, Discovery Channel, and what they kind of did leading up to the Netflix era. Of course, now the History Channel and Discovery Channel are all about reality shows, and you don't get those documentaries.
Right.
There's a few left. There's like the Science Channel and History 2 or History International or whatever they call it now. But I agree. That's how I watch most of my films. I rarely watch an actual like film on Netflix. I actually watch documentaries more. Like I go to that section first, and if there's nothing I want to look at, then I go and search the rest of the library. But yeah, it's fantastic. Well, let's go ahead and move along to our recommendations for this month, and let's start with Tom.
Oh, there's so many great documentaries to recommend for people to go out and see. But there are plenty of lists online that you guys can check out, and I don't want to take away from either of the other guys are going to be talking about one. So I'm going to take one I know that they're not going to talk about. It's the 2001 skateboarding documentary called Dogtown and Z-Boys that was directed by legendary skateboarder Stacy Peralta, and it's about the birth of the skateboarding movement in California in the 70s. Just really great archival footage, and it's so well told about how surfing moved off of the water and onto the concrete, and these kids were looking for a way to surf without access to the waves, and they came up with skateboarding. It's a really, really great documentary, but it's a really, really cool subject. But most importantly for me, it's a subject that's very low to the ground. And after watching Touching the Void and Man on Wire, it's what I'm looking for. So check out Dogtown and Z-Boys, narrated by Sean Penn. It is a really, really good one. You'll love it.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Let's go to Gabe.
Well, yeah, I'm going to stick with the documentary for a recommendation. And this may be an obvious one, but I think it's an example of how documentary filmmaking is advancing and how it's very beautiful and very cinematic, and also very engaging and informative. I'm going to recommend the Planet Earth series that the BBC put together. I just think they're amazing. I bought them on Blu-ray. I watch them every now and then, and every time I'm fascinated with them. I definitely recommend watching them in high definition. They were shot with incredibly high definition and some amazing filmmaking. Mm-hmm. These shots that they get, you're just how did they get that? And it's really amazing stuff about the Earth we live in. I don't live in it. I live on it, but. It's really amazing stuff about our
No wonder
planet.
your internet connection is so bad. You're living in a cave.
Yes, okay, it's true. I'm in a cave. I would definitely recommend watching it in high definition. Watch some of the stuff about the under the ocean stuff in the dark in high definition. It's just totally engrossing. You'll feel like you're there underwater, and it's just amazing stuff.
All right, thank you, Gabe. Sam.
Well, I too am keeping with the documentary flavor for our picks. One of the things about documentaries that I love so much is that it allows you to become immersed in a topic or a culture that you might not otherwise experience in your life. My pick comes from 2002. It's a documentary called Devil's Playground, and it's about Amish teenagers as they experience and embrace the modern world. They have a rite of passage called Rumspringa, which they're kind of allowed and kind of cast out of the Amish community and allowed to do the things that the Amish aren't typically allowed to do, such as use electricity and to drink and to smoke. And it's a rite of passage that is meant to show them what the outside world has, but then the ideal outcome is for them to kind of repudiate that and then come back and be fully accepted into the Amish fold and live the Amish lifestyle. It's a fascinating documentary. Again, it's from 2002. It's 77 minutes of just pure immersion into what some of these young kids go through. You see some of the participants in this documentary, they get heavily involved in drugs. Most of them, by the end of this, they come about and they come back to the Amish world. But then you also follow those that really kind of get lost in the English world, as they would call it. And it's just a fascinating documentary. It's not streaming currently, but it is available on Netflix. And again, it's called Devil's Playground. Just check it out.
That's a great pick. I guess mine will, since today is the 68th anniversary for D-Day, I think I'm going to have to go with World War II in HD. Kind of goes along with Gabe's Planet Earth. They didn't reshoot anything. Like, there's no reenactments. They actually took all this footage that was actually shot during World War II. They color corrected it. They added color to it and to some of the shots. Most of them are black and white still. But they also upconverted it all to HD, and it just is mind-blowingly beautiful. And it's narrated by a whole team of great Hollywood actors lend their voices to these characters that you follow from their start in the war to either when the war ended or when they are no longer able to fight or they are discharged. So I would recommend World War II in HD, which is a lot better than the actual documentary I was going to recommend, but I need to tell you guys about this. It's called Papatopoulos. I don't know if the three of you have heard about it. Here's the little summary for it. In 20 years, he's directed more films than Martin Scorsese. He's produced more profitable movies than Jerry Bruckheimer, and he's infuriated more actors than Alfred Hitchcock. The ultimate B-movie documentary focusing on B-movie giant Jim Wynorski and his attempt to make a feature film in 3 days. He's directed 70 feature films, but he's never made one in 3 days. Jim cuts the shooting schedule, has the actors cook their own food, and he cuts the lighting package down to just 2 lights so he can concentrate on the task of doing 100 setups a day. The Hollywood standard is 20. So I really enjoyed this. I was sick a few weeks ago with the flu, and I watched this on Netflix, and it was wildly entertaining. So, but I would also check out World War II in HD. There's some great stories in there. All right, let's go ahead and Sam, where can people find you? What can they find out what you're doing? Anything you'd like to plug, sir?
You bet. You can find me on Facebook, and 48 Hour Film Project is almost here again. You can find out how to be a part of that and how to get a hold of me at 48hourfilm.com/Des Moines. And I'm pretty easy to find on Facebook. You can also take a look at a link to some of the other projects I'm working on there, including a film we just got done shooting called I Think My Mom's Trying to Kill Me.
All right. Tom.
People can find me on Facebook, and also Vimeo is my new home base for all of my video stuff.
Nice.
Just a search for Cheshire Moon Films. I love Vimeo. It's an artist's paradise. Just going on and just checking out other people's stuff. Plus, I've got a friend that has a new podcast out called the Trailer Home Podcast. It talks about movie news and upcoming movies and stuff. Really? So if you check out the Trailer Home Podcast, it's pretty cool and getting off the ground and collecting all of our listeners. So go check it out. And that is it for me.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Gabe.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll just keep it simple. You can check me out on Facebook, although I've said this many times in the past. I'm not much. I'm more of a lurker than a poster. I don't post a lot out there, but it'll probably pick up here soon because we'll be participating in the 48 Hour Film Project here in just under 2 months, I guess now.
Yeah, not too far away.
Yeah,
not too far away at all.
Way too soon.
You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. You can follow Cinesmack which you better be following Cinesmack on Facebook and on Twitter for latest news and updates. And we would appreciate it if you could leave us a review on iTunes or whatever podcasting catcher you use. You can contact us at cinesmack@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook, which is what I just said. And we will be. Are we going to continue the Facebook contest, Tom?
I think we're going to suspend that for a little bit. I was just mortified with what happened last time. So, but don't forget to mention that people can follow Cinesmack on Facebook and Twitter.
Oh yeah, I heard that we have a page on Facebook.
Yes,
and we also Twitter.
Yep. And don't forget Facebook.
Twitter or Twitter,
yep.
Twatter.
Yeah.
Twatter.
Do you have a saying for twatter, Gabe? Like, I'm not a whatever, I'm a twatter.
No, that's where I spend all my time when I'm not, because that's why I don't Facebook. I'm twatting all the time.
Oh wow, that's
oh.
You only get 69 characters.
From Gabe.
Also, this month, our sister podcast, Character Smack, will be taking on Crockett and Tubbs versus Riggs and Murtaugh. I can't wait for this debate. It's going to be fun. And next episode, join us as we welcome another special guest. Well, if we get as we take on The Core versus Sunshine. This is going to be awesome. For Gabe, Sam, Tom, and myself, thanks for listening, and go catch a flick.
This has been a test of the Southsider Studios podcast system. This was only a test. If this were a true lack of entertainment, your head would explode. Go to iTunes and subscribe to our feed. Just search Southsider Studios.